lover from Limerick on the west coast of Ireland. You'll see that about 5 years ago, Grace started making knitting vlogs and podcasts on YouTube as she traveled around the world, and in the past several years, she has had her hands in dyeing, spinning, knitting, and weaving. She actually knit her own wedding dress, which we are going to talk about today. You can find Grace on her YouTube channel, which is Grace O'Neill, and she's also on Instagram as Babbles Yarns. So, okay, today's conversation is super fun. Grace is hilarious to chat with, and so let's go meet Grace.
Hello, how are you?
How are you?
I have to take a bag off a cat. It's very loud. How are you? I used to have a lighting and all that jazz, but it's all locked away in the craft room of despair. So
Okay, you're gonna have to tell me about the craft room of despair as well.
yeah, I am gonna have to tell you about it. It's gonna be a thing.
Well, I see there's a blanket right behind you. Is that a hand-woven blanket, perhaps?
Is actually a hand-woven blanket, but not by me. This is actually a hand-woven blanket by a guy up in Donegal called Eddie Doherty, I have to remember. And it's all from Irish wool. And it is so bobbly and gorgeous because it's just, it was like one of the most pricey things that we bought kind of on our trips and adventures. Mm-hmm. But it's literally the most loved thing. I love it so much. And the cats adore it. It's lovely.
Fantastic. So, Grace, thank you so much for being here today to chat with me about all things to do with fibre. I want to hear about so many things. You have been really inspiring to me personally, just because I see you doing so many different things, so many different aspects of fibre arts, and you do it so positively and with so much joy. And so I just wanted to see if you could share a little bit about your story, about how you got into all of this.
Yeah, so I guess I think it's probably a lot to do with my job. I work in a hospital, and I first picked up needles, crochet hook, everything when I was doing a lot of on-call. So I'm a radiographer, so I work kind of in emergency departments. People come to me first, well, not first, but like they come to me like in the first, that golden hour when they're quite serious and people are quite sick. So I'd have to be on call a lot of the time, so I couldn't be out doing anything. So what was I doing instead? I was sitting in the nurses accommodation knitting, and I was looking at videos and watching podcasts, and I was like, this is kind of cool. And I think, that as well, it kind of gave me a bit of fearlessness. I was like, listen, there's worse things than messing up a knitting project, or there's worse things than trying something and realizing you don't like it. Do you know what I mean? It kind of takes the fear out of crafting. It just brings pure joy into it because it's such a different aspect of it. So I think I've approached pretty much a lot of crafts like that. I just throw myself into it. Like, what have I got to lose, really? Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I have a couple of wheels that I bought, and then I didn't use them, or I didn't like them, and then I sold them on. Do you know what I mean? Now, it is a luxury to have that sort of spare money, which is from where the on-call the on-call paid for the crafts. But my first degree was actually in fine art. So I have a degree in printmaking, in print design. So I love the idea of the workshop and the group strategies and just trying loads of things. There was a big influence on experimentation, and then the recession came and destroyed that hope. So I went on to get a real job, and then with the paycheck, I was able to then spend money on the things I've always wanted to. So now I'm into mega saving mode because I'm an adult. But I think, that whole, maybe that background has also helped me kind of throw myself in fearlessly into any little craft that I get my hot little hands on, anything that gives me sparks a little bit of interest. I'm like, oh, give me that now. I want to have a little go with that. How does that work? I think I'm always really interested in how it works, how to get it how does it work? Tell me how it works. Weaving, I needed to know how that worked because I could not figure it out in my brain. So I took a class and then I was like, oh, and I still don't quite know how it works. Even though I do it, I weave, but it is a little bit magical. There's all this forced lap loom business that I don't know yet, but I'm gonna know at some point, I'm sure. you know,
Yeah, I
and
know.
there's something glorious about not knowing something as well. You're like, oh, what's that about? So I think throw myself, it's a general curiosity and fearlessness, because it's generally not the worst thing in the world. If it goes wrong, you can always try again. And that's the
Yeah.
great thing about yarn and fiber and all this sort of stuff is, especially with yarn and knitting, you just rip it out and start again. Do you know what I mean? It's not a big deal, really. And it's not the end of the world.
No, I love that. I love that sort of sense of curiosity and just following whatever is interesting to you right now, and then not having to be tied so much to your equipment or like, oh, I have to keep this, I have to keep this, or anything like that. Just like work with what you have, enjoy what you have, and then, like if you're done with it, you're not so attached to it that you're like, oh, I have to keep this, I have to, keep this wheel because I spent X amount of dollars on it or anything like that. You pass it off back into the universe and let
Yes,
somebody else use it.
so many people who want secondhand wheels, who want to learn how to spin. Do you know what I mean? So many people out there. And what I'm doing is basically, as well, I got really involved in the guild as well. I think guilds are so valuable for people who are learning and don't have access to like a pot of $500 or $700 to buy a wheel, their first wheel, if they're buying it, if they can't find one for €50 off of in the back of someone's garden, which is often how I find them. And, the guilds then offer an availability to actually rent them. And I actually have about 6 small little rigid heddle looms belonging to the guild in my craft room of despair, which I do need to hand back at some point. But with COVID and everything, the renting of equipment has kind of been a bit of a shutdown. But hopefully when things start opening up again, I really hope that people are going to take advantage and join their local guilds for any sort of, just giving it a go, even to see if you might like it, because
Yeah, that's like a very interesting point, and I'm really glad you brought it up about the guilds, because I just recently like have been trying to participate again in the local guild meetings here because they have been on Zoom, they've been online, so I've been able to participate, and I feel like there's a little bit of like an identity crisis with guilds now, feeling like, well, everybody's doing everything online and everybody's learning everything online. Like, why do we need to exist anymore? Like, why does anyone need us? And I remember joining a guild because, it's the centralization of equipment and knowledge and experience and people.
libraries, physical libraries as well.
Library. Yeah, getting access to books that you cannot get in a regular library, that you cannot buy. Just no one person can accumulate all of the things. And so the
Wow.
guild is like to share
Yeah.
those assets, to share those things. Yeah.
Definitely. And knowledge as well that's been built up over time, because I mean, there is this view of the guilds being of the older generation, which again, they're kind of, I have experienced a couple of times that they're reluctant to go online because they don't have the experience. But what they're lacking is just us to go into it. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Hmm.
And give a hand
Yeah.
and
But
begin.
all of that knowledge and all of the things that you could learn and be inspired by and the things that people are making. I know that like now they're sending a lot of the show and tell projects, and they're sending them around like online so we can see them and everything like that. And there's just the most phenomenal projects being made. I think there was one woman who was weaving with sewing thread, and she was like making patterns with sewing thread, like it was like
Oh,
mind-boggling. It was quite amazing. Just the kind of things that are being made. Yeah.
stunning,
So
stunning.
I want to quickly shift gears and ask you about all of the different crafts that you do, and also about your craft room of despair, because I love hearing about people's craft rooms and how they're organized, or if it's like a magical world where you go in and everything is, beautifully laid out. I would love to hear about
Hey,
yours.
all right. I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if anyone else is ready. But anyway, I'm not going to show you it because I just can't. I can't, but I can talk about it. So I first started off. Let's start off with my crafting history. I tend to pick up a craft a year. That's generally since 2016 when I started kind of knitting again. Or what I actually crocheted because 9 people in my department in work all got pregnant at the same time. So I had to make 9 blankets. Real fast, and crochet was the answer. So but then I started traveling and I was like, I just can't carry the bulk of the amount of crochet that you need. And I never really got into the amigurumi, which is like the small little things which would be quite handy for portableness. But I really love the idea of knitting, and knitting garments, specifically knitting socks, like a small kind of fine wool, take me a long time, but like a nice small kind of addictive project. So I started like learning how to knit properly, like by knitting socks, while I was traveling around like Southeast Asia. And then I moved to Australia. And then I started my podcast as an extremely baby knitter. And I loved it because I can look back now at my progress and see where I actually started and where I've come to now, full circle. For anyone who doesn't know, sorry, my podcast is called Babbles Travelling Yarns, and you can go back to baby Grace, and she had a funny English accent at that point, so very interesting. So but when I was in Australia, then of course, like absolute country of wool, I was at a knit night in Sydney, and one of the girls said to me, "Oh, my roommate has a sheep farm, a merino sheep farm. Do you want some merino wool?" And I was like, oh, "Yes," because of course all that I was hearing about was merino. Merino is beautiful, beautiful. But she literally the farmer himself, showed up with literally 3 bags full of fleece. And it was obviously the second grade or something that they couldn't sell. And it was like, one was gray, one was white, and one was black. But it was super fine merino. I'm talking like this, like about 1.5 inch long locks. That was a labor of love. But I actually bought a spindle, and I bought 2 dog combs, and I was there trying to wash the wool first and then comb it out and then spin it with a hand spindle. And I got absolutely obsessed with the hand spinning. I was like, wow. But what I realized was that it was very slow in the hand spinning. And I knew that I was going to dive right into this. And one of my absolutely gorgeous podcast followers at this time contacted me and said, "I've got a spinning wheel. Do you want it?" Obviously, it was torture, her watching me spin and all this wool to spin in the background. Like, she's not going to make it. She's going back to Ireland in 6 months. She's not going to make it. So didn't she give me the whole spinning wheel? And this is the spinning wheel that she gave me. This is the Ashford Traveller, Rosie McGowan, I'll call her. But absolutely beautiful. I took it apart and sent it back to Ireland, brought it back to Ireland with me, and she's been my favorite spinning wheel ever since. She's absolutely amazing. I think it's just because of the story, but also I think the Traveller's a brilliant wheel, actually.
I think the Traveller's the perfect wheel for Babbles traveling.
Absolutely.
It's perfect.
It's my brand. I'm keeping on brand. So then I moved back to Ireland then, and I joined a guild, because I had joined a guild in Sydney and I really enjoyed being part of it, being part of the whole aspect of it. But guilds are a big, big thing in Australia, and they're not really anything here in Ireland. There's only one. There's literally the National Guild, which consists of maybe 20 or 22 active members. I think there's about 100 members on the books, but... So I was really able to get very, very involved very fast with the guild. And it's actually quite a young guild as well. But I took a weaving class because I was like, oh, that looks interesting. And by the end of the night, I'd actually woven with hand spun. And Myra Naughton was my teacher, and she was a weaver. She was taught in the National School of Art and Design in Dublin when they had a big weaving course as part of their thingamajigger curriculum. And she was fascinating woman. She's still around, obviously. But then I got really, really, really into it. I bought a 16-inch loom, and I really want to push myself and get a big 24-inch. I think I might get a table loom, maybe a floor loom. I don't know. Anyway, that's in the future. because then I started actually doing retreats, and I started doing like kind of really, I started getting into yarn dyeing as well. And I took the SweetGeorgia course, the School of SweetGeorgia course on the dyeing. And I got really, really interested in that. And I did a bit of dyeing for a couple of years. I haven't been able to do it for the last couple of years just because of space and COVID as well. Just work has been too intense to come home and then dye for another 6 hours, which is what I was doing. It was like having a second job, but I still want to get back to it. It's just just seeing the colors like and how they interact. And and then I love all the different little aspects of the things. Like I got a book charka, and I bought it for maybe $100 from India. I got it sent over, and I need to fix it actually. The center thing's gone. But then didn't I get in contact with somebody in India itself, and they sent me over like nettle yarn and cotton yarn, like hand spun. I still have loads of it. I don't know what to do with it, but I have it. I just collect all these fascinating things from different parts of the country. And then last year, literally 2022, I didn't do anything in 2020 or 2021. Yeah, no, 2020, I didn't do anything because I was like, surviving. But I really got into macrame then, and everyone got macrame gift presents. So I'm still in the middle of my macrame, but I've kind of gone back to I always have my knitting. I always have my knitting, and I always go back to the spinning. But the loom has kind of sat there on the wall, a bit sad. Or this is my sitting room, craft room of despair. But yeah, so I have a lot.
I love how you have like multiple corners, right? Like you have this corner is where the certain things happen, and then there's going to be like another room where other things happen. I feel like it's not uncommon to have your craft things spread around.
No, absolutely not. And so the craft room is despair is a lovely little room on the ground floor, which has literally been off limits for 3 years because I can't get into it. No, I can. I get into it every so often because the printer's in there. But I find it incredibly overwhelming at the moment to go in there. And we're also, fingers crossed, anyone who watches this, fingers crossed for us buying a new house. Fingers crossed, all the mortgage and all the paperwork goes through. But in the new house, I'll have to be unboxing everything. So I literally have just ignored it, knowing that I'll have to go in there and just rip it to shreds. My mother is dying to get in there and just be like, what do you need this for? What do you need this for? How much is that? Throw away all that. You don't need any of that. And I'm like, oh, mother.
I feel like that's how I am with my kids' rooms. You don't need this. We can donate this. We don't need this anymore.
Exactly. 100% how it's going to be. So she's banned from that room because whenever she comes over, she finds something she can throw away. And I'm like... We have too much stuff. We do have too much. I actually can't wait for the move. I'm going to put a skip outside. I'm just going to open the window and just chuck all the stuff in. Oh, so satisfying.
Oh, I think it'll be so wonderful. Like if you do move into a new place and to be able to just like set everything up again from scratch, and then like you'll just have a better idea of
what you have and what you want to do. And yeah, it's really encouraged me not to buy any more yarn really over the last year because I know there's so much in there. And I think as well, I made a conscious decision last year. I have so much. I'm so privileged. I used to be a minimalist. I used to literally travel with a bag on my back, and I used to be so proud of myself. Absolutely the opposite happened when I became a crafter, which is normal, totally normal. And, but it makes me think, I have so much. All I have to do is go in there and I can literally make anything I want. Like, how lucky am I? So and also the lack of craft shows. I have zero willpower at craft shows or at yarn shows, knitting shows. Don't get me in the door and I'll be a grand down in 2 seconds. Well, that's what it feels like, You're like, I want want this. Tell me the story of this. I love you. I love you as a person. Let me buy 4 of this. I just love like what people can make. I love craftsmanship. I love just I love talent and skill. That's what I love, I think, the most. And I want all of the skills, even if I don't have the talent.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I'm like observing certain things in my kids right now, and like my daughter, she's 5.5, and she's been like, she every day she'll draw like a picture for me, and she's like taken to drawing pictures and cards for her teachers and things like that, and it's like I feel like it's really like an indication of this is how she shows love, right? That
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
making something for you. Because I watched her give it to her teacher this morning. She made a card for her teacher, she gave it to her teacher, and then like she was waiting for her teacher's
Yeah.
response.
Yeah.
Because like this is how she wants to show affection, and it's
Yeah.
so interesting. And then I think about like, yeah, how I grew up and like why do I make things and all sorts of things like that. I wonder like what do you feel like is your motivation behind the projects that you work on now?
Well, not as generous as your lovely 5-year-old daughter. I, my motivation is using all the beautiful things that people create. My motivation is feeling the, really utilizing and making good use of something that someone worked really hard to make. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
I think it's the actual materials which inspire me to make. I love getting that, the cast on, and you're just like, oh, this yarn. So, or like, as you're knitting, like the colors come through, and you're like, how did they do that? I think it's the curiosity and the like real admiration for artists. I
Hmm.
absolutely, that's probably it. Everything is mostly for me, so I'm like, it's too pretty. I can't give it to anyone else. Oh no. Yeah, so my motivation is my craft room of despair,
Hmm.
but in a lovely way.
Hmm. Now, tell me also about like the traveling because you did a ton of traveling and then you mentioned also you were doing retreats. So it's almost like because you've traveled so much, I don't know how many countries you've traveled to, but I think you mentioned at one point, but it was a lot.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I counted 34 countries. Yeah. My friend actually realized this is actually a scratch off map, but I haven't scratched anything off.
oh.
Because if I start scratching them off, I'll realize where I haven't been, and then I'll be like, my life is so short. So let's just, because most of them are in Europe, to be honest, and Europe is such a tiny little spot. I want to go here. I want to go here. I want to go here. I've done a few bits, the West Coast, blah, blah, blah. I want to go to, like, I've done a bit of Australia, but I never got to the center. There's always so many more places to go, never been to Russia. Well, I've never been to Russia. I could wipe all that map off if I did a weekend in St. Petersburg. So yeah, I do. Oh my God, I miss traveling so much. Oh my God. So yeah, when we got home and I got like a full-time job and I became a grown up, couldn't travel anymore. Um, I think I really wanted to bring traveling to me. I really wanted to kind of, what I loved about it was like the people that you just bump into randomly, and then you suddenly get inspiration from them, or where have you been? Tell me now. Oh my God, that's amazing. And I think the retreats were a way to have a little bit of an escape from my everyday, which didn't cost an absolute fortune. There was no flights involved. There was no, like it was based in Ireland, so most people were Irish when they came. But in the first year, actually, I did get a couple of and I actually have one girl who comes over from England almost every single time. Now England's only 25 minutes or 45 minutes on the plane, like it's like a bus ride, so it's not too far. But I think the retreats that I hold, I'm actually starting there's a test retreat going on, not this weekend, next weekend. So we're doing it with reduced numbers, and we're just going to see how it goes. The brave souls. I think they're desperate. They're desperate to get out and go somewhere different and see and just spend the time relaxing and traveling. And relaxing with friends.
So is it just a weekend and you all will get together and then knit
Yeah.
together for a weekend? Any classes, anything like that, or just like
No,
relaxation?
no, it's pure relaxation, pure relaxation. So, we hosted in Ballyglass House Hotel or Ballyglass House. It's actually, I think it's a country house. Yes. So, it only has space for about 11 people. It's very small. And, we arrive on Friday and we have a dinner in the pub beside the place, and the locals be there, and we all have our knitting out, and they're all like, the knitters are back, they're back, lads. It's lovely. And the owners are actually just such lovely people. Ruth, and she's got two little girls, and her husband does all the food, and her mum cooks the breakfast, and there's little dog and cat. It feels like a family atmosphere. You're really coming to a family home, and all that happens all day is you sit down, you chill out, you knit, you craft, you bring all of your crafts with you, and then you're just fed every 2 hours. It's ideal. Drinks brought to you whenever you want. It's honestly, I think, a little bit of heaven. There's literally so I was planning on, actually, in 2020, I was going to start the first classes, and like we used to have a makers market as well, from Irish makers all around Ireland who would come down or send me down their products, and I would set them up and we'd do a little sale. But because of COVID, we just decided to scale back on those things and just go back to basics, and just go back to just some time to ourselves with friends. And then as we go on, we'll hopefully be able to build up to kind of getting larger groups together, because there could be up to 50 people in the room at one time. And that's just a bit dodgy at the moment. So
Yeah,
yeah.
totally. But I mean, I think it's wonderful to hear that you're starting these retreats back up again, doing a little test one, getting a bunch of people out. I think it would be very, very exciting just to, yeah, I know when we did the first Knit City, when we participated in the first Knit City this past fall, it was just such a strange but exciting feeling to see people in person again, and just really, really nice. So I'm hoping you guys have a wonderful time. That'll be really lovely.
Yeah, I think woolen, I don't know, actually, I must talk to the girls, because woolen has been pulled for the last 2 years. That's kind of our Irish Knit City. And I don't know if they're going to run it. I feel like I would have heard it if it was going to start already, but we see, fingers crossed, because our restrictions are starting to open up now. So fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed for you.
Fingers crossed for everybody.
Now, I want to change, what am I saying? I want to shift topics for a second to ask you about your wedding dress.
Oh,
And the
yes.
story behind your wedding dress.
Behind the wedding dress. Okay, I had great plans for this wedding dress. I was going to get married in 2020, in September 2020. That obviously did not happen. But I had actually been hand spinning the yarn for about a year beforehand, and I had about 200 grams spun, and I was spinning a BFL and silk blend, but I was actually taking it off the top and spinning it by lock worsted. I was being so careful. It was beautiful. I was going to leave it as a single, so I was really careful with my twist and my angle and everything. I was really conscious about this, and I had washed it. I'd done enough, and I'd washed it, and I hung it up to dry. And the following morning, I came down, and Beans had torn it down off my cat, Mr. Beans, had torn it down off the line, and was currently mid-chomp right through it. Like, yeah. So, and then about 2 weeks later, the COVID pandemic started, and I was like, well, fine. No, it was so funny.
Did you salvage any of the yarn?
I was able to salvage. I think the biggest ball I was able to get out of it was 20 grams.
Oh.
out of 200 grams, I think it was. Yeah. So, but
That's
do you know what?
heartbreaking.
I started knitting it anyway. I was making up the pattern as I went along, never really having done complicated lace before. First mistake. Second mistake after leaving it near the cat. Anyway, so, but then didn't everything kind of kick off, and I was knitting it. I started knitting it actually when at the very start, and I was actually sent off because I had a cough. So I was sent off for 10 days because there was no testing facilities at that time. So I knit a load. I knit all the way down to here. And then I joined it in the middle, hung it up, and realized I hated it. Then I was like, fine. But then I went back to work, and then we decided to postpone the wedding. And I said, listen, we'll just ignore this now for a while. And then over the winter, then I decided to winter 2020, 2021, I decided, right, I'm going to do this again now. I'm going to really think about this. And I contacted my friend, because my mother was sewing the dress, and I contacted my friend Tuva from Norn Yarn, and I saw that she had a stunning 100% silk 2-ply base. And I asked her, like, what does that look like when it's undyed? Is it kind of an ivory color? Because the BFL that I had knit, that I had spun, was kind of more of a creamy yellow color, and it didn't really work with my skin tone. It needed to be a little bit more kind of white. So I contacted her, and she sent me over 2 skeins for free because she's lovely. But it was the most beautiful yarn. Oh my gosh, absolutely gorgeous. So then I had to start designing it again because I didn't like the design. So I bought a few dress patterns, lace dress patterns, lace wedding dress patterns, just to kind of see what they were at. And there was one which is called the Silver Mine pattern, which was a very structured panel dress, really interesting. And it had a rounded neck. I wanted a V-neck, and I wanted kind of narrow sleeves. This one was sleeveless. So I started off knitting the bottom. I knit the waistband, and it's a dragon scale pattern waistband, absolutely beautiful. And then I started knitting up the top, but I was putting in my own patterns, and I was knitting it in a larger gauge, because I really wanted to be airy. Because September, wearing silk with a corset underneath, you know, it can be very hot. And then of course my gauge was all off. So I ended up doing the whole front of the garment as a swatch. I started again with my right numbers. And honestly, I had the thing knit in about 3 weeks. I did have to, I'm really glad I took a class at Barcelona Knits, actually, Isabel Kramer's set-in sleeve class. And that was fantastic. Highly recommend if anyone wants to do any sort of garment construction. But I did the set-in sleeves, and actually my friend Jessica Young was also, she helped me a lot. She's fantastic. She's in my knit group. And so yeah, between the lot of us, there's so many people involved in this dress. We managed to make a dress that fit me perfectly and that I was so happy with, and everyone was obsessed with it. It had a I don't have it here, it's up in a bag, sorry, should have brought it down to show you.
You sent us photos.
Oh yeah, I'll send you photos so you can see them all. It had a lovely kind of V-neck. It's just a mesh pattern. It's really like yarn over knit two together, yarn over SSK on one side and the other, and down the front, and then like a band here, and then I just did a little simple leaf pattern under. It's just so effective. I really want to knit it again in one of Tuva's like really pretty colors, because it's a beautiful top actually. If you put like a little lace top underneath, or a little, you know, a camisole underneath, absolutely lovely. So that's in my future too. That's another project.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and actually it's going to be in a magazine. Someone contacted me. It's going to be in Prima magazine in April, I think. Yeah, April 22.
Really?
Yeah, there's going to be a little article. Yeah, it's really exciting. There's going to be a little article with 3 of us who've knit our wedding dresses. So keep an eye out for that.
I can't even imagine knitting a wedding dress. It just sounds like the most work ever.
I had an extra year, so... But I wasn't knitting the whole thing. I only knit the top half. So it wasn't the whole skirt. The skirt was just 2 layers of silk, 1 layer of tulle and 2 layers of silk. So at least I didn't have to do the whole skirt. The skirt is where it goes real. I was like, I'm not going to touch that.
So we mentioned at the top that like you make this podcast and you're on YouTube and you've been there for a couple of years now, right?
Since 2016,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking. Yeah, 2016. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So,
Um,
like, are you keeping everybody up to date on all of your projects, or how do you do it? I know that you did Vlogmas, which also seems
yeah,
like amazing. That
I
just
did
seems
it
really
a few
intense.
years. Now I failed utterly this year. But again, like I just throw myself into it a little bit. My mother hates it. She hates that I'm online all the time, but so what I do, what I really love about the podcast is even if nobody watches it, it's a record for myself. And what it's really done for me is I was so self-conscious when I was first doing it. But over time, I kind of just got used to myself and what I look like in real life and what I sound like and what I am. And I got comfortable with myself, like literally just with me as a human, being a person. And instead of like cringing at myself while editing, I actually found myself like laughing along with myself, even if no one else does, at least I laugh at my own jokes. And I think it's done actual wonders, even if nobody watched it at all. I feel like it's done huge, huge things for my own self-esteem. So like the quality of it is not top notch. And some of them the quality is great, and some of them quality is not so great. But what I've heard from again and again from my followers, from people who watch regularly, is they don't care what it looks like. They care what I'm talking about. They care about who I am. They care about what I'm making, about the stories I tell while I'm making them. And that's really what means the absolute world to me. Like, it's so, so nice to have like these people and then I meet them at the events. I think that's why I love the events so much. I meet these people and they come up to me and they know everything. And I'm like, tell me all about you though. I don't know anything about you. And then they're shocked. And I'm like, no, I'm serious. I love it. I absolutely love it. And it's really given me it's given me a real boost for my making as well, because I really want to finish things for the podcast. Do you know what I mean? So otherwise I don't think I'd ever finish anything. Really.
No, I think you have such an amazing attitude towards all of that, because I think that you could take it very much from a different angle and be like, oh, nobody's watching, and then feel bad about that. But I think that it's so good that you're so positive about the whole thing and that how it's made you feel more comfortable about yourself. I really wish that more makers would be sharing what they do in this format. I feel like
Yeah.
it's really been positive. Like when I started knitting, and started a knitting blog, and then seeing everybody else with their knitting blogs, I would spend like 3 hours a day just reading other people's blogs and seeing what people are making. I loved it so much. And if people were all sharing their stuff, in this format, I think it would be amazing too.
Oh,
So I think it's really encouraging how you've described how you do it.
yeah. I mean, I do everything on my phone with the crack screen, everything on my phone. I edit on the phone with just iMovie or whatever comes with it. Now, having an iPhone or having a phone that you can do that with is a massive privilege. Is like I'm saying, but it is actually, like I was talking to a friend. He comes from Zimbabwe, and he was saying that literally everyone has a mobile phone, but nobody has a landline. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And they actually use like call credit as cash, because the cash currency is quite poor. So I'm like, oh, that's fascinating how communication and connection has become the new currency almost. But that's more important than like a landline or anything like that. So I suppose being able to use what, like you said, use what you have, use what's around you, and it doesn't need to be fancy, like nothing.
It doesn't need to be a big deal. I know my son who's 8, I think he just like recently started to really notice how he sounds in videos and things like that. And he's like, that's what I sound like? And it's not like we haven't taken photos of him and taken videos of him for like his whole life. But
Oh, but
it's just now, I think in his brain, he's starting to realize that, oh, that's what I said. Because he's making a judgment of himself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But to become really comfortable with that from a young age, I think could be really good and not be dependent on what other people think of you, but what you think of you.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think we're all, you know, injured in some way in our past about something someone has said to us about, oh, my mother has a beautiful singing voice, but someone in school once told her she sounded like a crow, so she's never sang. Like, no, and these things can really hurt you. So, listening to himself, I find it really interesting, actually, because we are hearing ourselves through our own mastoid air cells. We are not hearing ourselves through our ears, because it's actually reverberating inside in our skulls. And then when you listen to it on the screen, you're like, that's not what I sound like. And I'm like, oh, it is. Just never heard it this way before, or you've not paid attention to it. How fascinating is that? Yeah.
Well, I love seeing about all the things that you're doing and all the places that you're traveling to. And so I really appreciate you coming and sharing all of this with me today and with everybody who's watching this. And yeah, excited for you for this year, and hope that 2022 will be a good year and wipe out all the other stuff.
Cross all your fingers, everybody. Cross them all. I
Cross your fingers for your house,
wash your
for your
fingers.
retreats.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's absolutely lovely to chat to you. We loved having you on the Fluff to Stuff as well. People got real information out of you for that. So thank you so much for that.
No, it's super fun to do. Yeah. Thank you, Grace.